The announcements I'd like to make really are to thank our sponsors, William Hill. We've had nearly three very, very happy years with them. Liam McKee and Lydia Evans are here representing them very ably tonight. And who knows, we're really hoping to have a continued relationship. But I'd just like to thank them on behalf of all members and hope that we can carry on for 3 more years. I hope you've all eaten well. We certainly have, and I think thanks are also due to Laura Ross, who's had to go home because she works for a living, and her team at the Savoy, and all the staff who've looked after us tonight. Thank you very much. And I'll be touching on these in a moment, but I would particularly we have a strong team from the FA here tonight. I'd particularly like, as a journalist, a former journalist, but representing all the journalists in this room who cover England, to thank Greg Demetrio, Andy Walker, and their team at the FA for the tremendous job that they do in helping us with the England team. I also have to make an announcement that I don't fully understand, but if anybody's tweeting or Facebooking or something, they must use, and Jerry Cox, who's our media supremo on the Football Writers Association, and I'll have to read this, hashtag FWA Southgate. I recognize the last bit, but that's all. So please use hashtag FWA Southgate, append it to all tweets and other social media things, because Jerry will be a lot happier if we do that. Seeing Gary Lineker tonight reminded me that, and as we're here to celebrate a tremendous relationship, in my opinion, the best I can remember, and God, I go back a long way, between journalists and media people generally and the England team. It reminds me of times when, despite the fact that we also had a wonderful man in charge at that time, Bobby Robson, later to become Sir Bobby, the 1990 World Cup. And Lineker was there. I remember him. I'll never forget it. It was the media and the players got off on the wrong foot right from the start. Can you remember that? And but England confounded the media by actually scraping through to the quarterfinals by virtue of a last-minute goal by David Platt. Very good goal, actually, against Belgium. And I remember the press conference afterwards. The players were all in a sort of sod-you mood towards us. And I remember we had a press conference at which the players didn't appear. Bobby had to do it all by himself. And afterwards, the players were driven away from the training ground. And I looked up, and there was Gary looking out the back window with his trademark cheeky smile, and looked straight at me and went like that. Now, if it had been anybody other than Gary, I would have thought cheeky sod, you know. But of course, all he was saying was, in the next game against Cameroon, I'm going to get 2 penalties and I'll put them both away, which he did. For those of us lucky enough to have covered major tournaments in which England are involved, I can remember so often coming back home from those tournaments and sort of asking yourself what is needed, with a sort of sense of a lack of fulfillment one way or another, and asking ourselves what is needed. More patience on the ball. I mean, I wrote pieces about that. And more togetherness off the pitch. But all the while we were out there doing that, the best analysis, with all due respect to the distinguished journalists and commentators in this room, was made by a player, a member of the team who, under Terry Venables, briefly united the nation, but, as so often, just fell slightly short. That was Gareth Southgate. And when he took over as England's head coach, he put the knowledge that he'd collected into practice. And we, as journalists, were part of it. Because this time last year, about 5 months short of the World Cup in Russia, Gareth was here and told this gathering that there would be a new relationship between the England team and the media, or the England team and their fans through the media, which is all we are. A new atmosphere in the camp. When we got to Russia, in fact, even before we went to Russia, there was a turning point. And when we realized just exactly what this would entail, because a press conference was held which was different from anything the FA had done before. And I know that previous, equally constructive FWA teams had tried to put this into practice. All 23 players were made available to the whole of the media. I know that the FA were not sure about that in the past, because they thought everybody would go to the more newsworthy players and the others would be left alone. At any rate, at this press conference, a group of journalists gathered around Danny Rose. And Danny Rose felt able to talk to largely strangers about illness, about mental illness that he'd suffered in the past. And he just decided to unburden himself, and he spoke at great length. And the following day, when the media reported this, they reported it much as you would have done, any of us would have done, if an old friend had said, "I'm sorry, I've not been so well lately." It was written with, rightly so, a human interest, a human sympathy, and a human perspective. And this, although what Danny Rose said was not known, was not planned by Gareth and his team at the FA, the freedom that he and his team had given to the players to speak led to that interview, which completely, in my opinion, not completely, but radically changed the relationship between the England team and its fans by way of the media. We all, for the first time that I can remember, became friends. While Steve Holland and Gareth were doing it on the pitch, Greg Demetrio and the rest of the FA team were doing it off the pitch, and we were all the beneficiaries. And afterwards, when England qualified after the tournament went so well, England qualified for the semi-finals by beating Sweden. And there was a piece I particularly remembered by one of our members, Sam Wallace, in which he reported on Gareth's press conference afterwards. And he chose to use a lot of the stuff that you would normally throw away because it wasn't controversial. And it was a list of all the people that Gareth had thanked. And it included Jake Livermore and a couple of other players who'd been left out of the squad and were back home feeling probably a little bit empty, and he remembered that. He talked about the wives and families of players. And finally, he said, "I'd like to thank Roy Hodgson," who probably might have been forgotten amid the euphoria of a feel-good factor about an England team, which Roy didn't always enjoy. And he thanked Roy Hodgson for having had the courage to blood a lot of the players that Gareth and Steve were using to such good effect. Now, I think reading that press conference, and I'll never forget reading Sam's account. I read Sam's account, maybe others were the same, but I thought in that you understood why players want to rally around Gareth Southgate.